Sweetheart, we don't hand out change to drifters out here. Whatever you're begging for, go do it somewhere that isn't my community. Begging. I was standing on my grandfather's dirt, mending his fence with his pliers, and this woman in her spotless white SUV had already filed me under vagrant. Ma'am, I said, not looking up from the wire, I'm not begging. I own everything you can see from that fancy little steering wheel. She laughed. Actually laughed. Then she lifted her phone and clicked a photo of me. For my records, she said, sweet as antifreeze, and she snapped her fingers. Right on cue, gravel crunched behind me. A county cruiser. Her baby brother, Deputy Royce Cutter, unfolding out of it with his thumbs already hooked in his belt, close enough I could smell the gas station coffee on his breath. You've got till Friday to clear off, he said. Then I come back with a tow truck and a court order, and we take the whole place. We clear. I looked at him a long moment. We're clear. What I didn't tell him was that Friday was a terrible day to steal this ranch. Because 40 yards behind me, my grandfather's barn was wrapped in yellow tape. There was a permit stapled to the door, federal, not mine, and 3 people were already parked in the cedar break past the ridge, waiting. Deputy Royce Cutter had till Friday to seize my land. He had no idea he was about to walk his badge straight into an active FBI crime scene, on camera, in front of the whole town. Let me back up and tell you how a woman in a golf cart community decided my family's ranch belonged to her. My name's Solomon Beckett. Folks call me Saul. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent most of those years right here on 240 acres of hill country outside Persimmon Hollow, Texas. My granddad bought this ground in 1948, paid cash every dollar. There's a screen door on the main house that still shrieks on its spring exactly the way it did when I was 6, and I've never once oiled it because that sound is home. You learn to hear your whole childhood in a rusty spring. Granddad didn't inherit anything. He worked 2 jobs and saved in a coffee can, and when he finally walked into that county courthouse and put the money down, the clerk made him count it twice. He counted it 3 times, just to be sure nobody could ever say a Beckett came up short. My aunt's Odette, Nana Odette to everybody under 60, still lives in the little house by the tank. She's 91 and sharp as a fresh-stropped razor. She has one line she says like scripture, usually while snapping green beans on the porch. Beckett ground was never given to us, baby, and it will not be taken from us. Then she snaps another bean like she's breaking somebody's finger. I turned out a lot like Granddad. 20 years in Army logistics will do that. I keep records the way some men keep grudges. Every receipt, every letter, every notice I've ever gotten in my life is filed in a labeled coffee can on a shelf in the barn. My nephew laughs at me. I tell him the same thing every time. Paperwork is just patience you wrote down. He'll understand that one day, sooner than he thinks, actually. Now, about the neighbors. 3 years back, a developer bulldozed the old Haney place next door and put up Whitethorn Estates, beige houses, beige mailboxes, a man-made pond they charge you to look at, and a homeowners association run like a small nation nobody remembers electing. The queen of that nation is Delphine Cutter, board president. She's got a binder thicker than a phone book and a smile she keeps in a drawer for when the cameras come out. The first time we met, she pulled up while my ranch hand Bo and I were unloading feed. She marched right past me, stuck out her hand to Bo and said, "You must be Mr. Beckett, such a responsible-looking gentleman." Then she turned to me, the actual owner, sweat-soaked and covered in caliche dust that never fully washes off your hands, and said, "And you're doing a wonderful job keeping the place tidy for the owners." The smell of diesel and cut hay hung between us. Bo about swallowed his own tongue, trying not to laugh. I just tipped my hat. Some corrections aren't worth the breath. Some corrections you save. I want to be fair to the truth here. It wasn't the first time somebody looked at me on my own land and did the math wrong. You get used to it, the way you get used to a rock in your boot on a long walk. But there's a difference between a rude assumption and a scheme, and Delphine Cutter was about to cross that line with a staple gun and a smile. She just didn't know I'd spent 20 years in the Army, learning that the loudest person in the room is almost never the one actually in charge. Then came the envelope, crisp white HOA letterhead. Inside, a notice of HOA assessment and lien. According to Delphine Cutter's board, my family's ranch had been annexed into Whitethorn Estates, and I now owed $18,400 in back dues plus fines for non-conforming outbuildings. That's my granddad's barn, plus a livestock nuisance penalty for the cattle that were here 70 years before her pond. 30 days to pay, it said. Cure or foreclose. There was just one small problem with the whole beautiful document. My ranch was never in her HOA. It predates the entire development by 70 years. You cannot annex land that was paid for in a coffee can in 1948 into a subdivision that didn't exist until a bulldozer showed up in 2022. I read it twice. Then I walked out to the barn, dropped it in a coffee can labeled evidence, and said to the dog, well, she put it in writing. Rule 1 of dealing with people like Delphine, the day they put it in writing, is the day they hand you the rope. Delphine did not wait 30 days. Delphine waited about 30 hours. I came around the barn Tuesday morning to find her on her tiptoes in her white sneakers, pressing a bright orange sticker onto the barn door. Code violation, non-compliant structure. She had her phone up in her other hand, photographing her own handiwork for the HOA newsletter. I found out later the caption read, "Cleaning up our community, one eyesore at a time," exclamation point and everything. The sticker wouldn't stick. 70 years of dust on that door will do that. So she licked her thumb, actually licked it, and pressed the corner down like she was fixing a smudge on a toddler's cheek. The morning was already hot enough to shimmer cicadas winding up in the cedars like tiny chainsaws. "Ma'am," I said from the porch, coffee in hand, "I wouldn't touch that barn." She assumed I meant it was dirty. She gave me a little pageant wave and kept pressing. What she didn't notice, what she never once looked at, was the smaller sticker underneath the orange one. The one she'd just covered up. Plain official and a very particular shade of federal. But we'll get to that. Here's the thing about a woman with a binder: she thinks the binder is the law. So I decided to go find the actual law and introduce them. I drove into town to the county clerk's office. Cool tile, the smell of old paper and burnt coffee. A ceiling fan clicking like it was counting down to something. I asked for 2 documents, and folks write these down because this is the first thing that saved my ranch. I pulled the recorded plat map and the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for Whitethorn Estates. Every legitimate HOA has these on file with the county, and they include an annexation exhibit, a legal map showing exactly which parcels are bound by the HOA. It's public. It costs about $1 a page. And when the clerk slid it across the counter, I ran my finger down the list of annexed parcels, looking for mine. It wasn't there. Not on the exhibit, not in the legal description, not anywhere. Delphine's own founding documents proved my ranch had never been part of her little kingdom. I carried the plat out and spread it across the hood of my truck in the courthouse lot, the paper going soft and warm in the sun, and traced the boundary of Whitethorn Estates with one finger, like a man reading a treasure map. Their line stopped a clean quarter-mile short of my gate. Whoever drew up my annexation hadn't even bothered to make the geography lie convincingly. That's the tell with these people. They get so used to nobody checking that they quit doing their homework. Takeaway: an HOA can only bind land that was legally annexed into it. Pull the recorded plat and CC&Rs at the county clerk. And if your parcel isn't on the annexation exhibit, their lien is worth exactly nothing. And because I'm my granddad's grandson, I recorded the whole conversation with the clerk on my phone. Texas is a one-party consent state, which we'll come back to in a big way, but for now, just know I had it all. Paper and audio. By the time I got home, Delphine's newsletter had already made its rounds. Bo read it on his phone by the feed shed and laughed so hard he had to sit down on a salt block. "Non-compliant structure," he wheezed. "Saw that barn's been non-compliant since Truman." Then he got serious the way Bo does and wiped his eyes. "She's not going to stop, you know. Woman like that being right isn't the point. Winning is." He wasn't wrong. But being right, it turns out, is a real good place to stand while somebody else loses. I didn't call Delphine. I didn't yell. I mailed her one-line certified return receipt, requested, "Please produce the recorded instrument annexing my parcel. S. Beckett." Certified mail costs about $8. It bought me something priceless. Because a week later, that little green return receipt card came back to my mailbox, signed for on the other end. It wasn't signed by Delphine. It was signed by Royce Cutter, deputy. I stood at my mailbox in the heat, turning that card over in my fingers, and I felt the whole thing shift under my boots like loose gravel. Why in the world was a sworn sheriff's deputy signing for his sister's homeowners association mail? Why was law enforcement anywhere near a fake lien? I didn't have the answer yet. But I clipped that card to the file, dropped it in the coffee can, and thought she sent me a sticker. I sent her a question. And somehow my question came back heavier than her sticker. When you don't answer a woman like Delphine, she doesn't go quiet. She goes public. The next Whitethorn Estates community meeting happened in the clubhouse folding chairs, a sheet cake sweating under fluorescent lights that hummed like a trapped wasp, and a coffee urn producing something that was technically brown. I know all this because Beau's cousin lives in the subdivision, and she recorded it on her own phone and sent it to me. God bless small-town gossip. Delphine stood up front with her binder and read my ranch into the official minutes as a problem property on the county road. She got the board to vote to authorize enforcement action. And this is the part that told me exactly who I was dealing with. She'd invited a stringer from the county paper to document our community's progress. Then she said the quiet part. Not a slur. She was too polished for that. She waved a hand toward the window toward my land and told a nervous board member, "You have to understand these older properties on the county road. The standards out there just aren't the same as ours." Murmurs of agreement, nods all around the folding chairs. She smiled like she'd said something generous. Beau's cousin told me the stringer wrote it all down like it was gospel. Later, after everything, that same stringer would be very eager to remind the whole county that he'd had questions from the start. Funny how that works. Courage gets a lot cheaper once the danger's already over. That's the thing about her particular brand of ugly. It came dressed up in words like standards and community and values, and it counted on everybody in the room agreeing not to look too closely at what those words were doing. So I gave her something to look at. Two things, actually. First, I drove back to that courthouse, and I filed a homestead designation on my primary residence. Now, Texas has some of the strongest homestead protections in the entire country. Protections written to keep families from being forced off their own land for most kinds of debt. Filing the designation puts it on the public record in black and white. This is a family homestead, and you do not get to force sell it over some invented HOA fine. Takeaway. A recorded Texas homestead exemption shields your primary home from forced sale for most debts, including junk liens. File the designation with your county clerk and put that shield on the record before you need it. Second, I recorded a document of my own against my title. A notice of no annexation and adverse claim. Plain language planted right in the public record so that anyone who ran a title search on my property would trip straight over it. If Delphine wanted to sell my ranch to somebody, that somebody was going to open the title report and find my flag stuck in the ground first. Let me put that one in plain English because it's a good trick to have in your back pocket. An adverse claim is a flag you plant in the public record that says loud and permanent, somebody disputes who owns this. Title companies live in mortal fear of flags like that. A buyer sees one and runs for the hills. It cost me $26 to record. $26 to make my ranch legally radioactive to anybody trying to steal it. I paid my recording fees, got my stamped copies, and I was feeling pretty good about the whole operation, until the deputy clerk went white. She was a soft-spoken woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and when she pulled up my parcel number to attach my filing, she stopped. Just stopped. Her eyes flicked up to me and back to the screen. She lowered her voice under the click of the ceiling fan and said, "Mr. Beckett, I'm sorry, I can't really discuss this one." She slid my copies across the counter, fast, like the parcel number itself was hot. I said, "Can't discuss what exactly?" She just shook her head. "There's a hold on it. That's all I can say." I walked out into the parking lot with sweat cooling on the back of my neck and my heart going a little sideways, because I hadn't put a hold on my own file. Delphine's fake HOA couldn't put a hold on a county record. That takes real authority. That takes a badge, and not the kind Royce Cutter wears to bully ranchers. Somebody with power had already been standing on my land in the record before I ever showed up asking questions. Delphine wanted an audience for her little enforcement show. That was fine by me. I was starting to suspect I already had one, and it was a whole lot bigger than a clubhouse full of folding chairs. Royce came back on a Thursday, and this time he brought paper. I heard the cruiser before I saw it, that particular crunch of duty tires on caliche slow and heavy meant to be heard. He parked crooked across my gate like he owned the approach, got out and stapled a notice of trustee's sale to my own fence post. My fence, my post, his staple gun. The notice said Delphine's HOA was accelerating and had scheduled a foreclosure sale of my ranch for the first Tuesday of the month. Making good, I guessed, on his little Friday promise from the front gate. His cologne rolled off him in a wave some drugstore thing trying to punch above its weight, and lost the fight to the diesel and manure it met halfway. He leaned on my fence thumbs in the belt. Again, that man loved his belt, and gave me the speech. My sister's board voted Beckett. Paper's paper. You'd save everybody a whole lot of trouble signing over now before it goes to sale. He tapped his badge in case I'd forgotten it was there. Make it easy on yourself. I offered him a glass of water. It was 96 degrees. He looked at me like the glass was a trap. It wasn't. The trap came later, and it was a lot bigger than a glass of water. No thanks, he said, and drove off, radio squawking a call he ignored, because ignoring it looked tougher. Now, a lesser man might have panicked at the word foreclosure. But foreclosure has a weakness, and its weakness is that it needs clean title to work. You cannot sell a piece of land free and clear if there's a legal cloud hanging over it. So I put up the biggest cloud the law allows. I went and hired a real estate attorney Marlene sharp as broken glass, worked out of a converted feed store in town, and we filed a lawsuit to quiet title. That's a suit that asks a judge to declare, officially and permanently, who owns the property and to wipe out any bogus claims against it. And the moment we filed it, we recorded a lis pendens, Latin for a suit is pending, a public notice that this land is tied up in active litigation. Takeaway, a recorded lis pendens legally freezes a property's title while a lawsuit is pending, and no clean foreclosure sale can close over it. It stops a bogus trustee's sale dead in its tracks. Just like that, Delphine's first Tuesday sale couldn't happen. No buyer would touch it. No trustee could deliver clear title. Her timeline snapped like a dry cedar branch. Marlene enjoyed this part more than was strictly professional. A lis pendens is the legal version of a chain across the driveway, she said, capping her pen. They can rattle it all they want. Nothing's rolling out of here. Then she poured us both bad coffee from a pot that had clearly been on since the Reagan administration, and we toasted my granddad's gate with it. But here's where the ground really moved. Filing a quiet title suit forces the title company to run a full formal search on the property. Every lien, every claim, every flag dug up and printed out. Marlene got the report back and called me into the feed store, and she was quiet in a way lawyers usually aren't. She slid the pages across her desk and pointed to one line near the bottom that neither Delphine nor I had put there. It read, "Subject property flagged Federal Hold U.S. District Court. Contact case agent." I sat in Marlene's office with the window unit dripping into a coffee can, and I read that line 4 times. Outside the window, a freight train went by, long and slow the way they do out here, and I remember counting the cars because my brain needed something small and orderly to hold on to. A federal hold. A case agent. I'd been so busy fighting the loud cutter with the sticker that I'd missed the quiet somebody who'd been standing behind me the whole time. A federal hold. A case agent. On my granddad's ranch. Delphine thought she was fighting a broke old rancher over a barn. What she didn't know, what I barely knew yet, was that somebody with a federal badge had been quietly guarding that barn the entire time. For weeks. And I'd never once met them. I'd spent a month fighting the wrong cutter, over the wrong thing. The real story was locked inside my own barn, under a sticker Delphine had cheerfully covered with orange. The case agent found me before I found her. She left a note under my truck's wiper. No name, just a diner, a time, and come alone, and don't touch anything in your barn. So Saturday morning I slid into a cracked vinyl booth across from a woman in a plain blazer, who was already 3 cups of coffee ahead of me. Special Agent Marisol Reyes, FBI. She had the calm of somebody who'd read the ending of the book you were still on chapter 3 of. "I didn't want to meet at your place," she said. "Your barn's evidence. I'd rather not muddy it." She turned a thin folder around so I could see it. "Mr. Beckett, how much do you actually know about what's in your loft?" Turns out, a lot more than Delphine, and a lot less than the Bureau. Here's what Reyes laid out, one flat sentence at a time, while my eggs went cold. Years back, a man had used a neighboring parcel as a straw purchase, a fake buyer for a dirty deal, and he'd stashed a footlocker up in my barn loft when the place sat empty one winter. Inside that footlocker, forged deeds, notarized, fake HOA annexation exhibits, and a burner ledger tracking a whole operation. He'd figured an old barn on an old ranch was as good as a hole in the ground. Except I'd found it. 2 years ago, fixing a leak in the loft, I'd opened that footlocker, seen what it was, and done the single most Beckett thing possible. I did not touch it. I did not move it, and I called the government. Then I left it exactly where it lay and kept my mouth shut while they built their case. The yellow tape, the federal sticker under Delphine's orange one, that was them. That was mine to protect, and I'd been protecting it. Then Reyes dropped the part that made me set my fork down. "Those forged annexation exhibits in your loft," she said. "Same forger, same notary stamp, same ring as the paperwork your neighbor's HOA has been using to lien and foreclose on paid-off parcels all over this county. The fake lien on my ranch, the invented $18,000, the annexation that never happened. Delphine and Royce Cutter Reyes said, are subjects of this investigation. The HOA wasn't a homeowners association. It was a laundry. Manufacture fake dues, invent an annexation, foreclose on land owned by folks the county wouldn't go to bat for, and flip it clean to a shell developer. I was supposed to be victim number 9. My granddad's coffee can ranch. Number 9. I did some quiet math of my own right there in the booth. 8 families. 8 paid-off pieces of ground gone before anybody with a badge who actually cared showed up. Folks who'd probably gotten the same crisp white envelope I did and didn't have a coffee can full of receipts to fight back with. That's the part that stopped being funny. That's the part that made me lean across that sticky table. Then Reyes explained the piece that changed everything. The piece Delphine and Royce did not understand about their own scheme. Your barn and this parcel are under a federal evidentiary hold, pending forfeiture, she said. That designation supersedes any local lien, any HOA action, any county trustee's sale. Their paper is void the second it touches this ground. And Mr. Beckett, physically interfering with sealed federal evidence is obstruction. Cutting that seal is a felony. It doesn't matter what county document they're waiving. Take away property under a federal hold or seizure order outranks any local lien or foreclosure, and cutting a federal seal or hauling off sealed evidence is a felony no matter what paperwork someone's carrying. I looked out the diner window a long while. Then I looked back at her. You don't want me to stop the foreclosure anymore, I said. You want them to come do it. In public. Reyes almost smiled. I want a confession that walks itself onto your property, in front of witnesses. I thought about Granddad counting his money 3 times, so nobody could ever say a Beckett came up short. I thought about that orange sticker. Then let's give her a red carpet, I said. You don't rush a thing like this. You build it the way you build a good fence. Corner posts first, then you stretch the wire tight enough to sing. First the corner posts. My people. Nana Odette heard the whole plan on her porch, snapping beans. And when I finished, she was quiet for a second. Then she said, Baby, your granddad counted that money 3 times. You count these people twice. And she started cooking like it was a wedding, because in her mind, a reckoning and a celebration used the same recipes. Then there was Wendell Pryor, my neighbor down the road who'd lost 5 acres to this exact ring 2 years back and never stopped being sick about it. Wendell has a drone. He flies it over the church picnic every summer and narrates it like a nature documentary. When I told him what I needed, he got a look in his eye I hadn't seen since his wife's funeral lifted. I fly it for the Lord's picnic, he said. I can fly it for the Lord's work. He became my eye in the sky. And the deputy clerk with the reading glasses, the one who went white, she found me in the feed store parking lot and said quiet, I'll say who put that hold on your file and when. Under oath. I'm tired of being scared of that family. Corner post number 3. Now the wire, the actual trap. I hired a licensed surveyor to come restake my true property line, bright pink pin flags every 20 feet, so there could be no argument about where my land started. Then I rehung the federal notices, big orange and black camera-legible placards on the gate and on the barn seal. I made them impossible to miss. Because the whole plan depended on one thing: if the cutters crossed that line, it had to be a choice, not a mistake. Takeaway. A current boundary survey plus clearly posted legal notice turns "I didn't know" into "I ignored the signs." It converts a trespass into a willful, provable act on camera. Next, the bait inside the bait. I rolled my granddad's 1953 tractor restored, waxed gorgeous, the prettiest thing I own, right up to the edge of the taped zone, where a man like Royce couldn't possibly resist hauling it off first. You want to catch somebody greedy, you leave out something shiny. Then the ears. I set up audio recorders along the approach to the barn, out in the open, on my own property. Remember, Texas is a one-party consent state. I'm a party to any conversation happening on my land, so I can lawfully record it. Nothing hidden, nothing sneaky, everything captured. Takeaway? In a one-party consent state, you can legally record any conversation you're part of on your own property. Set it up in the open and let people incriminate themselves on the record. I'll be honest, wiring my own barn to record the people coming to rob me felt strange, almost rude, like setting a nice table for a guest you already know is a thief. But that's exactly the point. Everything I did in the open, on my own ground, inside my rights. Let them be the ones sneaking around at 2 a.m. with fence pliers. I'd be the one standing in the daylight with the receipts. And last, the timing. This was the part I enjoyed. I found out Delphine had already invited the county paper and a TV stringer to film her big enforcement action as a public relations victory, and she'd scheduled it for Founders Day, when the whole town would be out on the square. She wanted an audience for my humiliation. So I didn't cancel her spotlight. I made it brighter. I quietly tipped a regional reporter that something a lot bigger than an eviction was going to happen at the Beckett Gate at noon. The more cameras, the better. Delphine was building a stage to shame me on. I decided to let her build it and then walk her out onto it. Agent Reyes and her forfeiture team would wait in the cedar break past the ridge, out of sight, engines cold. My signal to them was the simplest thing in the world. The second a cutter's hand touched that federal seal, they'd come. I gathered my crew the night before in the barn under a work light, and I gave them exactly one rule. Nobody touches them. Nobody yells. We don't stop these people from making the worst decision of their lives. We just stand back, keep the cameras rolling, and let them make it. Somebody asked what happens if it goes wrong. I said the only way it goes wrong is if one of us loses our temper and hands them a story about the angry rancher instead of the story that's actually true. So we stay boring, Wendell said. We stay boring, I agreed. Boring men win lawsuits. Nana Odette handed out slices of pie like communion. Cornered animals get loud, and Delphine Cutter got very loud. First came the smear. The Whitethorn newsletter ran a full page under the headline, "County Road Property a Threat to Our Values," complete with the photo she'd snapped of me at the fence that first day, dust on my face, wire in my hands, looking exactly like the drifter she'd decided I was. She worked the local Facebook group hard, hinting to anybody who'd listen that I wasn't even really the owner, just a squatter hiding behind some paperwork. The word paperwork from her like it was a con. From a woman whose entire empire ran on forged paper. I laughed so hard I scared the dog. What she never understood is that a smear only works if the people hearing it don't already know you. Out here they knew my granddad. They knew my aunt's pie. They knew the squatter hiding behind paperwork had pulled half their trucks out of the bar ditch every winter for 30 years. Her newsletter landed in mailboxes full of people who'd eaten at my table. All it really did was make folks curious about what I could possibly be hiding, which as it turned out was a federal case with their own neighbors' names all over it. Then came the bribery, which was clumsier and a lot more criminal. Royce cornered my white-faced clerk in the courthouse parking lot after closing. She got the whole thing on her phone and her purse, one-party consent, learning fast. He told her to lose the Beckett hold, or he'd suddenly remember her cousin's old DUI. Then he drove out to my place to make me an offer of his own, sign a quitclaim deed, walk away today, and he'd make the whole nuisance disappear, cash on top. He leaned in the truck window breath like a gas station burrito and slid an envelope across my dash. I said, "Let me think on it." He heard fear. What he'd actually done was hand me a recorded felony with a bow on it. I dropped the envelope untouched into a gallon bag and labeled it. I did not open it, and I want to be clear about that because it matters. The second you touch the money, the story changes. Now it's your word against his about what was really offered. Leave it sealed, bag it, date it, and let the recording carry the weight. An unopened bribe is a much louder witness than an empty envelope. Takeaway: if someone tries to bribe you, don't touch it, and don't haggle. Preserve it sealed and dated, and let your lawful recording and the intact evidence do the talking. Then came the sabotage, and this is where it got personal. Somebody cut my front fence in the night and shooed my cattle out onto the county road, manufacturing out of thin air the exact livestock nuisance the fake fine had cited. I spent 2 hours before dawn walking cows off the blacktop in my headlights, cussing in a way Nana Odette would not approve of. Boots slick with dew and diesel. But here's the thing about a man who keeps his whole life in coffee cans. I also keep a game camera on that fence line. I put it there for coyotes. What it caught at 2:14 in the morning was Royce Cutter's personal pickup, and Royce Cutter's own face lit ghost green by the infrared caught mid-yawn with fence pliers in his hand. Deputy of the Year. I saved that clip to 3 drives in a cloud folder. I named the file deputysleepy.mp4. Some evidence you file solemnly. Some evidence you file grinning. I called Bo out to watch it over coffee the next morning. He watched Royce yawn on the little screen, set his mug down real slow, and said, "That's a sworn officer of the law committing a crime in night vision." A pause. "Sol, I have never in my life been so proud to own a coyote camera." By now, Delphine was doing pre-victory interviews. She told the TV stringer offhand, thinking the mic was down, "Between us, these old families out there, they just let things go. Somebody has to hold the line." She thought she was being charming. It was all on the stringer's B-roll audio. She kept handing me rope, and I kept coiling it neat. Then Agent Reyes called with the only warning that actually worried me. "They can feel the heat," she said. "A ring like this, when it panics, it moves fast. They may try to seize that barn early, not to make a point. To destroy what's inside it before we can use it." Which was exactly what I was counting on. The one place they'd rush to grab was the one place that would bury them. They just had to reach for it in front of everyone. I stopped counting the felonies. I started labeling the files. Delphine went all in on a Wednesday, and she did it with a flourish. She got a trustee's deed and a self-help seizure order signed off by a friendly notary, one of the ring's own, I'd learned later, and she declared in a press release she emailed to half the county that she would personally execute the seizure of the Beckett Ranch at high noon on Founders Day. Law enforcement, the release promised, will be present. That meant Royce in uniform, lending the weight of a county badge to what was really just a private land grab. She even had a photographer lined up. She wanted the picture of me watching my granddad's tractor roll away on a flatbed. While she printed press releases, I got quiet. Real quiet. The morning before Founders Day, I walked my whole fence line at dawn, alone, the way Granddad used to. Fog sitting low in the draws, the grass silver with dew, one bobwhite calling somewhere off toward the tank. I checked every pink pin flag. I checked every federal placard. I ran fresh tape across the barn doors myself and pressed it down clean. No dust this time. Then I stood in front of that barn a while in the cool, and I said a few words to my granddad that are between me and him. I'm not a superstitious man, but standing there in that gray light, I could just about feel 3 generations of Becketts lined up behind me, arms crossed, waiting to see if the boy had learned anything. Count the money 3 times. Keep every receipt. Don't raise your voice. I'd learned it. I was about to find out if it held. I moved Nana Odette and the young ones across the county road to sit with the church folks' front row seats, but on the far side of the rope. "You keep them safe," Odette told me, gripping my wrist with a hand like braided leather. And you keep your voice down when it happens. A quiet man scares them worse. Wendell charged his drone batteries, all 4 of them, and set up a second phone to mirror his live stream. So even if somebody knocked one camera down, the feed would keep running somewhere they couldn't reach. Reyes's team slid into the cedar break before the sun cleared the ridge, engines cold out of sight. She and I had exactly one line between us by radio. "You sure you want it public?" she asked. "We could do this quiet." They put my grandfather's barn in their newsletter as a shame, I said. "We're going to make it public the other way." She was quiet a second on the line. Then, "You know most people in your spot want it fast and private. Get it over with." "Most people," I said, "didn't get their picture printed in a newsletter under the word eyesore." She let out a short, surprised bark of a laugh. "Fair. See you at noon, Mr. Beckett. Don't cross your own tape." I promised her I wouldn't. Easiest promise I ever kept. By late morning, the heat came up. Thick cicadas roaring, diesel and dust, and funnel cake sugar all riding the same air off the square. And here's the last little moment, the one that told me it was really going to work. Royce showed up early to scout the gate. He walked right up to my orange federal placard, and for one honest second I saw he actually read it. His face changed. A frown, a flicker of something like sense. He half turned toward his sister's SUV to say something. And Delphine, fixing her lipstick in the side mirror, snapped without even looking at him. "Oh, it's a bluff, Royce. Cut the chain. We're on television." He did what his sister told him. He always did. I watched that whole exchange from the porch through a pair of my granddad's old field glasses, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, almost pity. He'd had one clean second to be a smarter man than his sister. 1 second where the law reached out and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Son, don't." And he handed the second right back. Some folks you can't save from themselves. You can only stand back and keep the camera steady. That right there, a sworn deputy warned by a federal sign, told by his sister to ignore it, choosing to ignore it on camera. That was the whole case. She just didn't know she'd already lost it. The trap wasn't a rope or a pit. It was a strip of tape, a camera, and a woman who could not stand to be told no. Noon. Founders Day. The county road lined 3 deep with folks who'd wandered over from the square, funnel cake in hand, sensing free entertainment. 2 news cameras on tripods. Wendell's drone up high, humming like a hornet with a purpose. And my grandfather's gate wrapped in bright orange federal notice. The barn behind it sealed and taped, waiting. Delphine arrived like a coronation. White SUV, white sneakers, clipboard held to her chest like a scepter. A smile she'd clearly practiced. Royce rolled in behind her, driving a county-adjacent flatbed tow truck, chain cutter in one fist. Another deputy, riding along to make it look official. I stood outside the tape, hands empty, not blocking a thing. When Delphine marched up to the gate, I said it plain loud enough for the cameras and every soul on that road to hear. "Ma'am, that's a federal notice. Do not cross that line." She didn't even look at me. She waved one manicured hand at my face, the exact same shoe she'd given me the very first day, at the very same fence, and said, "Sweetheart, move along." Same words. Full circle. I almost thanked her. Then it happened, and it happened fast. Royce stepped up and cut the gate chain. It dropped and hit the caliche with a bright, ringing clank that I will hear on my deathbed happy. He backed the flatbed toward my granddad's tractor boots, crunching gravel. And Delphine, because she could not resist a camera because she needed the shot, walked straight to the barn doors, grabbed the federal seal in her own manicured fingers, looked right into the news lens and said, "This eyesore comes down today." She ripped the seal. The tape tore with a sound like fabric, and for 1 full second the whole world went quiet. Cicadas. A hawk crying somewhere over the ridge. Funnel cake sugar on the wind. Then from the cedar break past the ridge engines. 2 black SUVs came boiling out of the tree line, dust roaring up gold behind them, converging on my gate faster than anybody on that road could understand. Doors flew, windbreakers with 3 yellow letters. "FBI, step away from the structure, hands where we can see them." You have never seen a crowd's funnel cake hit the ground so fast. Agents secured the barn, and when they swung those doors wide for the cameras, for the town, for God, and Wendell's drone, There it was, the footlocker, forged deeds spilling out, the burner ledger, the notarized fake annexation exhibits with Delphine's ring all over them. The eyesore she'd come to destroy was the exact evidence that would convict her, and she'd just torn it open on live television with her own 2 hands. A gasp went through that crowd, like wind through wheat. Somebody near the front, a Whitethorn homeowner, one of the ones who'd nodded along at the meeting, said out loud to nobody in particular, "Oh, she actually did it." Yeah, she actually did it, on camera, with her own hands, in front of the exact audience she'd invited to watch her win. Royce went for his badge, reflex, started puffing up, "I'm a sworn dep." Agent Reyes stepped in front of him and calmly laid a printed still on the hood of his own flatbed. Deputy Sleepy.mp4, his face ghost green, pliers in hand, cutting my fence at 2 a.m. Beside it, the transcript of him threatening my clerk. His hand came right back off that badge, slow, like the badge had gotten hot. Delphine found her voice shrill and climbing. "Do you know who I am? This is my community. I have standing. I demand." Reyes didn't raise her voice at all. "Ma'am," she said, "you tore a federal seal on live television. We know exactly who you are." That's when I walked up to the tape line, still not crossing it, I'm no fool. And I handed Agent Reyes one thing. A coffee can labeled evidence in my own handwriting. Certified letters, the smear newsletter, the clerk's sworn statement, every receipt, every notice, every stamped filing. My granddad's method, filled to the brim. Then I looked at Delphine Cutter being walked past me toward an SUV. And I said it, quiet, the way Nana Odette taught me. "You spent a whole month telling me where I belonged." I tipped my hat. "Turns out you're the one who didn't know whose land she was standing on." I picked a torn scrap of federal tape off my boot and let the wind take it. Overhead, Wendell's drone did a slow, triumphant lap. The town, unsure whether you're allowed to applaud a federal raid, applauded anyway. And from across the road, clear as a church bell, came Nana Odette. "Amen. Now who wants pie? Here's how it all shook out, because I know you want the receipts." Delphine and Royce Cutter were both indicted federal fraud, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and a stack of related charges, thick as Delphine's old binder. The whole ring came apart like a cheap fence in a storm, once the ledger opened up. The forger, the crooked notary, the shell developer, all of it. The bogus annexation of my ranch was voided in court, and my quiet title suit closed clean and permanent. On paper and in fact, the Beckett ground is Beckett ground. It always was. But the part that matters most isn't what happened to them. It's what happened to the 8 families before me. Through the federal forfeiture, every parcel that ring had stolen went back to the folks they'd stolen it from. Wendell Pryor got his 5 acres back and cried right there in Marlene's feed store office, and then immediately asked if his drone was going to be on the actual news. It was. He's insufferable now. I love him. If you take one thing from this whole story, take this. Keep everything. Keep every notice, record every conversation. You're lawfully allowed to record and put every objection in writing, dated and certified. A polished villain with a badge and a bluff will fold every single time against a plain patient man with a full coffee can. Takeaway documentation is the great equalizer. A shoebox of dated records beats a bully with a title every time. Some evenings now I sit on the porch and listen to Nana Odette explain to the young ones what really happened here. Not just the raid, the history. Land like ours has been targeted like this for generations through fake liens and forced sales and men who show up talking about standards and cleaning up the community. What I did wasn't only saving 240 acres. It was breaking a pattern that's older and meaner than any HOA binder. She snaps a bean when she gets to that part. I finally hung my granddad's original 1948 deed, the one he paid for out of a coffee can, in a frame. Not in the house, in the barn, the eyesore, the vault that held the line. It felt right putting it where the whole thing almost ended, and instead began again. And because Beckett ground was never given to us and won't be taken from us, I decided it ought to give something back. I put a conservation easement on the back pasture and opened it as a small community nature preserve. Trails a pond you don't have to pay to look at, and shade for anybody who needs it. I started the Beckett Family Land Legacy Scholarship, helping local kids, especially from families who've lost land, study ag science, surveying, and property law, so the next time somebody shows up with a fake lien and a real smirk, there's a 19-year-old with a clipboard who knows exactly which document to pull at the county clerk's office. And this fall, Persimmon Hollow held its first annual Founders Field Festival right there on the preserve. Piled tractors and kids running barefoot through a pasture that a whole lot of people tried very hard to steal. The festival was winding down, golden hour cicadas easing off, when a man in a golf shirt and 2 white teeth walked up and handed me a business card. A regional developer. "Just planting a seed," he said, smiling. "We'd pay a very generous number for the whole spread." I looked at that card. I looked across the field at Agent Reyes, who'd come for the pie and stayed for the sunset, and who was already watching him. I pocketed the card. The Cutters were small-time folks. The name on that card is a much bigger story. That one's for next time. So let me ask you something before you go. Has a clipboard and a phony badge ever tried to take what's yours? Drop your HOA nightmare in the comments, the worst one I read out loud on the channel next week, and we all wince together. And if you want to watch me find out what that developer thinks is buried on the Beckett place, hit subscribe, and whatever you do, don't touch the barn. I've been doing this a while now, long enough that most of these stories start to rhyme, but I keep coming back to the number. $18,400. That's what they told Solomon Beckett he owed, for a barn his own grandfather built on land that was never theirs to begin with. And here's the part that stays with me. He never raised his voice. Not once. While they were stapling notices to his own gate, he was just keeping his receipts. Every letter, every notice in an old coffee can like it was nothing. See, they wanted him loud. Loud men make mistakes. Loud men sign things they shouldn't. Saul just waited. Let them keep talking. You could almost see the exact second it turned. When she reached for that seal on camera in front of the whole town, she thought she was winning, right up until she wasn't. I don't know, maybe you've run into one like this yourself. Somebody on your own street who finally figured out that the loudest person at the meeting is usually the one holding the weakest hand. If you have, I'd like to hear it. Tell me down in the comments. I read them. That's honestly where half of these come from. And if this one sat right with you, do me a small favor. Give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't, just so the next one finds its way to you. Because there's always a next one. Saul got his ranch back, quiet as it started. We'll leave it there.